All right, so for those of you guys that are tuning in today, I am Melissa Ojeda. I'm on the back end today, and right now you're looking at Dr. Tyler Nordgren, and he's going to be kicking off a presentation today. Half the Park is After Dark. Tyler, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa. So welcome, everybody. I've been Grand Canyon's first astronomer in residence, and we're coming to the end of my time here. And so I wanted to be able to share with folks a little bit about why Grand Canyon chose me, what I've been doing, and really where my passion and work has been able to take me with America's national parks. So hopefully everyone's able to see this. It's a photograph that I took of myself actually down in Big Bend National Park, showing the Milky Way over the Chisos Mountains and me standing there. Actually, as a car drives by and lights up the landscape. But all of this is about the national parks and our experiences in it. Literally, half the park happens after dark. And let's see if we can, oops, this is not advancing. All right, hold on while we. Okay, there we are. All right, fantastic. Well, any talk about science, art, national parks really has to begin with Thomas Moran and the Hayden Expedition 1871, in which Moran, this artist, a European trained artist in Philadelphia, was asked to join this scientific expedition to go out that was exploring the Wyoming Territory, the Yellowstone River, and the Missouri River out in what today is Montana and Yellowstone. And when they got to this amazing landscape of yellows and oranges and red mountains and canyons and buttes, and of course the geologic features of the geysers and the geyser basins. Stories had circulated for years about the otherworldly nature of this place, and Moran, as part of this expedition, was documenting this landscape through his paintings. And while there, made sketches and watercolors, but upon his return to the East Coast, did this incredible iconic painting, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, which hung in Congress and was one of the instrumental movements to make Yellowstone National Park the world's first national park. So I want to start there because for much of scientific history, the discoveries that we scientists were trying to convey to the public and record were recorded through art, first through drawings, sketches, cave paintings, later paintings, photographs, and today we have digital imagery as well. And you'll see some of that in this talk today. So when we think about national parks, and that's where my passion really lies, is working with the national parks. One of the things that will quickly, you'll come to realize when you visit a national park is this other aspect of art in the national parks, namely the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, art campaign of the 1930s to get people to go out and visit America's national parks. And so, for instance, here is one of those actual posters that was created during the Depression to employ artists to help spread the news about science, information, culture, natural history to the national public. And this one shows Old Faithful erupting, and the simple color palettes are indicative of the lithograph style and technique of the time. These were cheap posters just trying to get the words out about ranger programs and what you could see if you went to a national park. Well, as time developed during the World War II era, the Department of the Interior employed photographers, in particular Ansel Adams, most famous landscape photographer of the era, to actually go out and photograph these national parks. And so while you may be familiar with his Yosemite photos, he also photographed Grand Canyon, Old Faithful, and a number of other national parks out west. And these, in fact, these photos are hanging in the Department of the Interior's headquarters back in DC today. They're enormous prints, and you can also find them elsewhere. But at the time of the post-war era, when GIs were returning with cameras eager to take their families out to national parks, these were the photographs that inspired this new generation of park goers in the post-war era. And so today, there's this other revolution with art and the national parks that has taken over. And it's one that's particularly relevant to what I work with, what I study, and what I'm working with the national park on. And that's digital photography. One of the things that digital photography has done is allowed us to capture images that otherwise would have been tremendously difficult to help illuminate an aspect of these national parks that otherwise didn't get recorded and make their way into the national media. So for instance, here's a photograph that I took of the sun setting over Fajada Butte in Chaco Culture National Historical Park out in northwestern New Mexico. And it's an iconic part of that little park that's part of the ancestral Puebloan people at the heart of the culture 1,000 years ago. And so as the sun sets behind the butte, well, elsewhere, like all places around the world, the sun sets and the stars come out. And so here we see a star-filled sky over Grand Canyon National Park. The moon illuminates the buttes and mesas within the park. And in fact, the only illumination you see is a tiny little bit of light down at the very bottom of the canyon, which happens to be Phantom Ranch. So when the sun goes down, you might be, if you've ever been out to say, Mather Point, which is where this photograph is taken at sunset, you'll see that you're shoulder to shoulder with photographers. But once that sun is down, most of those photographers traditionally left. But starting around 1990, 2001, as digital photography really became affordable for amateur and early professional photographers, one of the things these photographers found is that they didn't capture the stars above the park. And I took this photograph in 2000 with the National Park Service. And the reason why the stars within the parks are such an important thing, and why I spent a year-long sabbatical traveling through the parks, photographing the parks at night, and working with park rangers about the parks at night, can be seen in this image right here. This is a NASA spacecraft image. It's actually a mosaic of images showing our entire world, our entire planet at night. And what you see are the lights of our civilization. Europe is ablaze with city lights. India, you can see the outline of India where lights spread throughout the subcontinent right up until you get to the Himalayas. In the United States, you easily see that we have a dark half and a light half to our country. The light half is ablaze with lights. Florida is outlined. The Northeast is just flooded with light. And as you go west, at a certain point, around about the 100th meridian, you encounter darkness. And darkness is one of the central features of the west coast of the United States, and something that makes our Western US such a special place for visitors from all over the world. So what I have here is a mosaic made from that data. Remember, those are city lights shining up to illuminate the underside of a spacecraft and the camera on that spacecraft. Here, what astronomers have done is they've taken all those pinpoints of light shining upwards and calculated how bright the sky should appear directly overhead from any place in the world. For this image, we're just looking at the eastern half of the United States. And these colors are coded in brightness levels. So the darkest places are blacks and purples, all the way up to the brightest skies, which are in yellows and reds and eventually whites. On top of that, you see these dark blue spider webs. Those are the interstate freeway system. And then in dark red, you have the outlines of our national monuments, parks, scenic drives all across the US. So what you see here is the eastern half of the United States. And as no surprise, it's incredibly bright. For colors, say, brighter than yellow, folks living in those areas will never see the Milky Way from where they live. In fact, that's one of the things that we have found from these images, is that 80% of the United States population no longer can even faintly see the Milky Way from where they live. And think about that for a moment. Up until about 100 years ago, maybe 200 years ago, The night sky, a natural night sky, ablaze with stars, and the Milky Way, the lights of our galaxy spreading from horizon to horizon, was a nightly occurrence. And now 80% of people can't see it at all. All right, so here's the eastern half of the United States. We now go to the western half, and there's that sharp division along the 100th meridian. And what you have is really the difference between where people are living and where they're not living. Light follows people. Turns out people follow the water. So east of that division, you've got a lot more water than west of it. And what we see here are a lot of our iconic national parks: Grand Canyon, Yellowstone up there in northwestern Wyoming, in the heart of Wyoming's dark sky country. Grand Canyon in northern Nevada's black skies. And same thing with southern Utah. Capitol Reef, Canyonlands, Lake Powell, BRYCE, natural bridges, all of these in the midst of one of the darkest places in the United States. So these make the national parks special. They are the place that your average family, no matter where they may live in the world, can travel to see a nearly natural night sky. So once the sun goes down and the stars come out, there is the Milky Way stretching overhead. And here we see a photograph of the Milky Way arcing down out of the sky into the western horizon above the mountains, and the salt flats of Badwater salt flats visible in the nearest distance, these strange hexagonal ridges as the salt contracts. Here's another photograph. This one is of Natural Bridges National Monument in southern Utah. And in the sandstone arch, you can literally see the center of our galaxy setting behind it. Photographs like this and measurements that the National Park Service made back in 2007 of the natural night sky brightness were the reasons why Natural Bridges National Monument was declared the world's first international dark sky park. And if you've ever been there, you understand why, because literally the brightest thing you see at night, if the moon is down, the brightest thing you'll see at night is not some city light on the horizon. It's not some car dealership sign around the corner. It is the center of our galaxy. And here's Yosemite Valley, where Ansel Adams took so many of his photos, and the Milky Way rising to the east. From that photograph, a lot of media came out. I wrote a book about astronomy in the national parks, but that photograph also got used in a national parks magazine. It even made the cover of the Saturday Evening Post. And so this is something that all began happening in that first decade of the 21st century, the early 2000s. Suddenly, people could photograph the night sky above the national parks. And once they photographed it and social media came along, soon you look through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, look up photographs of your favorite national park, and odds are some of the most spectacular photographs you're going to see are of the night sky. And the fact that this is happening at exactly the same time that we are losing that night sky to the artificial light of our cities, our malls, our street lighting, this all came about at a wonderful moment. People were realizing what they were missing. And so the national parks have done this great job of studying how light affects what birds can see in the park. And here's a subset of that mosaic I showed you earlier, showing the brightness of the skies above Arizona. And what you can easily see here is that, of course, the brightest thing in Arizona is Phoenix. At the Grand Canyon, there's the tiny little town of Tucson right outside of our boundaries. And its light, the lights of Phoenix, and actually some of the lights from nearby Las Vegas, and then out on the Navajo reservation in Cameron and Tuba City, all of those have an effect because light knows no boundaries. Even if the park itself does a good job of shining its light downwards, using as little light as necessary to help preserve these skies, we are still at the mercy of towns around us. So let me show you a photograph that I took about a week ago. This is a photograph from out on the Hermit's Rest Road out at Maricopa Point. And what you can see looking due east is the Milky Way rising. But underneath that layer of clouds and reflecting the light from underneath it are the lights of Tuba City, Cameron, Page. And even there on the rim, you can see the lights of the south rim of El Tovar, of the Grand Canyon Village. All of these affect the night sky. Fortunately, Grand Canyon has done an amazing job of working to protect those night skies within the parks. Even in the last decade, I can see lampposts having been retrofitted to be night sky friendly. And in fact, they don't even have to look all science fiction-y or industrial. Some of these new lamps that Grand Canyon has put in look amazingly retro. They look like they could have been the original lights of the park itself, and yet they help preserve the night sky overhead. So astronomy and the night, all of these things have a rich history here in our national parks, in particular Grand Canyon. And one of the things I want to show you is this is some photographs, old black and white photographs of the Apollo astronauts training before they went to the moon. They came to Grand Canyon National Park to learn about the geology here so that they could study and bone up on their geology before eventually going to the moon. And so when just a couple of years ago in 2019, we had the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing on the moon. One of the things that we also had was a celebration of the role that these national parks played in getting us to the moon. So that book that I showed you earlier, Stars Above, Earth Below, one of the things that came out of that book was a series of artwork that I had done that was in that style of the WPA. And over the years since then, I've started working with the national parks to help promote night skies or astronomy education using this artwork. And so you see here one of the posters that I designed for the various national parks and monuments that had a hand in helping train the astronauts before they went to the moon. And so we see a couple of astronauts dressed in full spacesuits, which they did not actually wear in the national parks, but you could see what it might be like had an Apollo astronaut been walking along, say, in this case, the trail up to Craters of the Moon National Monument. And in fact, the national parks that we have really are a great example of things that you might see elsewhere in space. And that's research that I've helped work with national parks upon. So for instance, what you see in this photograph is a color image. The colors are not strictly accurate. They've been stretched and changed in order to make it look like you might see on Earth. And I say like you might see on Earth because this is actually a photograph of Mars rock that you see there. It could be something that you might see in Grand Canyon, Canyon, in the same types of layers, say in some possibly similar formations, but tell us the history of the place. Maybe the history out in Painted Desert, but for Mars, it's the history of Mars. And within those layers, we can determine if water had ever been flowing across the Martian surface. And in fact, it appears that in fact it has. So one of the other things that I did for that book was create a series of posters advertising that role that the national parks had in our understanding of the universe around us. And so if you've ever been out to Monument Valley or any of the Red Rock National Parks and monuments, like say Zion, BRYCE, what you are seeing out in those parks is an image of what it might be like to walk across the surface of Mars. So those WPA posters, they urged Americans to go out and see America. And it was a wildly successful campaign. So starting in 2009, working with the national parks, I created a new poster campaign, not just See America, but See the Milky Way. And the slogan that I came up with for this was half the park is after dark, to represent that other half the park once the sun goes down. And as parks around the country began to get designated as dark sky parks to celebrate the jobs they were doing, to give people a place to come and see the Milky Way, to protect that starry sky, we helped promote those parks in the same way. And so, for instance, Big Bend National Park was the second dark sky park in the United States. But people have been looking at the stars since there have been people out here, and that has been going on for thousands of years. I mentioned Chaco Culture National Historical Park earlier. Here's a photograph of Casa Rinconada, a giant ceremonial kiva, a large round room with two enormous T-shaped doorways that go into it. I'm sitting in one of those T-shaped doorways. Looking across, I see the other T-shaped doorway, and directly above are all these concentric circles. Those are the stars. As the Earth turns, the stars seem to move in the sky, and they all turn around the point directly above the North Pole, and that is the star Polaris. And you can see that in this photograph. It appears directly above that other doorway. And what this tells you is that this kiva, those two doorways, are aligned with the rotational axis of the Earth. They are aligned with true north. And you only get that by paying attention to the sky. So in working with the national parks, I spent 14 months traveling through 14 different parks. That was back in 2007, 2008. And since then, I've traveled all over the national park system. Here we see Bryce Canyon National Park and the moon just rising. And there's the poster that I did for Bryce Canyon upon its designation as an international dark sky park. Or on the East Coast, Acadia National Park, a beautiful park where you can still see the Milky Way, even with the city lights of the eastern half of the US. Half the park is after dark there. They have a big night sky festival every September and October. Or Old Faithful, erupting by the light of the Milky Way, and the Lodge, which is out of the field of view in this photograph. But at Yellowstone National Park, one of the things that we say is that this is where the inside of the Earth, the world beneath, meets the world above. Speaking of the world above, here we are on the Continental Divide in Glacier National Park at one of the chalets. And while I was on sabbatical there, I spent a night traveling along the Going to the Sun Road and seeing the Milky Way in one of the highest points you can drive to. Or Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park in Colorado, a deep, narrow chasm. And there, this was actually one of the first Half the Park is After Dark posters I ever created. Out in Northern California, LASSEN Volcanic National Park has wonderful volcanic action, just like at Old Faithful. And here we see me along the boardwalk. And using that photograph, like it is showing the same feeling in the Bones Hell region of mud pots and thermal springs. In Yosemite, while most folks go to the valley, up along the Tioga Pass Road, you get a chance to see the Milky Way high above at about 7,000 feet. And Arches National Park. There I am standing down up, which turns out to have a giant drop off right outside that field of view. But Arches National Park is a spectacular place to go and see a naturally night sky. And at night, it's far less crowded than it is by day. And it's one of the reasons why it was also called created as an international dark sky park recently. But Grand Canyon is special. And here I am at Desert View Watchtower, watching the Milky Way setting behind the tower. Or hiking down in the inner gorge above Phantom Ranch. I see the Milky Way stretching from the south rim directly overhead at dawn. And it's for this reason that I've done the majority of my artwork for Grand Canyon National Park. In fact, when Grand Canyon was designated an International Dark Sky Park, they asked me to design the sign that would demonstrate this designation and would go outside the main visitor center. And here we see at the Grand Canyon Visitor Center, that sign on display. It is the largest sign in the biggest location at the most visited visitor center in really the best national park in the US. But as the astronomer in residence, the number one thing that I did while out here Give thoughts, meet piece artwork that has the view more or less from the Maricopa, Mojave Point, where I made sketches over the period of days. One showing that view that we have by day, and especially as we move on to dusk and the sunbeams begin to stretch down into the canyon. But then once the sun goes down and maybe a crescent moon is there, or the planet Venus, like you can see now off to the west after sunset, and that setting Milky Way that stretches eventually, right now at this time of year, it's in the east, but later on in the fall, it will stretch down into the west, and that Milky Way overhead. Two aspects of the canyon, two aspects of the park, but two very important aspects for seeing our world the way everyone used to be able to see it. If you could only see one of these, you would know that you had missed something fundamental about our natural world. And so it's important that places like Grand Canyon National Park protect both of them, these views by day and the stunning stars at night. So I want to thank you all for joining me here. Here's, by the way, one of the other posters that I was lucky enough to do that talks about the work that the national parks have done specifically here in Grand Canyon to promote these dark skies. And I think at this point, I'm just happy to open this up to any questions folks might have.
Okay, so Tyler, we do have some questions in, and this first question is from David, and he's going to be coming up to the South Rim soon, and really wanted to hear from your perspective on the visibility of the Milky Way with the new moon coming up and what that experience is like.
Okay, so right now we're at about a 2, maybe 3-day-old crescent moon. Most of the photographs that I showed you here were actually taken with like a 3-day-old crescent moon. I find that crescent moon lights up the landscape just enough so that you can actually see it. In particular, well, actually, like the poster here on the screen shows, if we're still looking at it, you can see the shadows and light within the canyon. I love that natural lighting that the moon provides, and yet you'll still be able to see the Milky Way overhead. As you move on to, say, first quarter, which will be, I think, this next weekend, it begins to get a bit more iffy. Your camera may capture the Milky Way, but your eyes may not, and that's because the light of the moon will keep you from getting fully dark adapted. But your camera will probably still capture it.
Wonderful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the screen share,
okay,
so that they can see you. And then this other question is coming from Trish Murray. Trish, great to see you again. She would like to know, are there any state or national laws to promote dark skies?
Yes, there are a number. For instance, Flagstaff, the nearby city where I was an astronomer about 20 years ago, has various lighting ordinances that prevents you from having extremely bright lights that shine straight up into the air. That limit, that's one of the reasons why in Flagstaff you can still see the Milky Way from town. Data shows that Flagstaff puts out as much light as a town only 1/3 as big as it. So it actually has an effect. The International Dark Sky Association is an international association specifically formed to help promote these sorts of ordinances and safe lighting that's also effective lighting that doesn't put out all this wasted light. New Mexico as a state about 20 years ago declared the night sky to be a cultural resource. So there are a number of these lighting ordinances all throughout the US, but they're all at a grassroots level, community level. And that's one of the best ways to really handle this at a community level.
So I do want to share some feedback that we've gotten. Robert Carr and Mara and Trish all just say they love the posters.
Oh, thank you.
Great use of color. And Christine also just has really enjoyed the presentation. So
thank you.
To share that with you. As far as your experience, if you had to pick a place, what do you think is truly the darkest place to ever experience the night sky?
Oh, the darkest place I've ever experienced the night sky. I'd have to say it was Big Bend National Park. I spent 5 nights camped out in the backcountry there south of the Chisos Mountains. And in those 5 nights, for whatever reason, that time of year, it was March, there was nobody else camped nearby. So I saw no lights from any other campfire, campsite. There was no light from a house on the distant hill. There was no glow from a city over the horizon. There was no blinking radio tower. And in fact, at night, there didn't even seem to be airplanes flying overhead. So it was the one place I've been to where as far as I knew, the electric light bulb had never been invented.
So this next question is coming from Bobby. And they had shared that they grew up in New Jersey and, really was not able to experience the night sky until their adult life, and is planning on doing a trip to Grand Canyon. Is there one season over another that you would recommend for night sky viewing?
So my recommendation, first and foremost, is take a look at the phase of the moon. You want to be here when it is new moon or third quarter. Third quarter means the moon is rising after midnight. It'll be up before dawn. So avoid full moon first quarter. So first of all, no moon in the sky in the evening when you're up and about. Second, I love the Milky Way. And in the photograph that you can see behind me here, there's a photograph I took from Yavapai Point of the Milky Way stretching from the south to the north rim. The Milky Way is the single greatest sight that we can see with our eyes that show that we are part of some vastly cosmic connection. The Milky Way galaxy, a collection of 100 billion stars. The Milky Way is at its brightest in summer and fall. So my recommendation would probably be to come out here in fall, September and October. There, the sun sets relatively early. It's not so incredibly hot. The skies tend to be a little clearer, not so dusty, hopefully not as many forest fires and not as much smoke. So I would pick a moonless night in September or October.
So you've had a lot of experience in different national parks and really outside. If you had to put an hour of logging how many hours you've been outside capturing the dark skies, what would you say?
So for instance, when I did that sabbatical where I spent 14 months in the park, I was outside literally every single night I was in the park capturing photographs. So that was that was over 300 nights for this sabbatical, for this residency that I've done here, where it's been about 2.5 weeks now. I've been outside for about half of those. I spent the first half of my time here out on the rim, getting photographs, photographing people as they were looking at the night sky. And those were the moonless nights. Since then, I've started working more on, I did the artwork that you saw earlier, and I've started preparing to look at all the photographs that I've taken in order to present the ones that I do to Grand Canyon Conservancy and the parks, because that's one of the things I'm doing as the astronomer in residence here. I'm giving them access to these photographs. And so I want to find the best ones so that they can use them to help promote dark skies.
With your time here as Grand Canyon's first astronomer in residence, how do you think you'll take this experience on to your next project or the next work that you're going to be doing?
This time here has been stunning. I hate to say it, but the majority of the posters, the artwork that I've done for a lot of national parks, especially over the last 5 years, and if you go to my website, you can see there's something like 60 or more of these posters that I've done for parks and monuments. For most of the last few years, especially the last 16 months, they've all been done from photographs, either photographs that I had taken once a long time ago, or photographs that I've just found Googling things online. And given my knowledge about where the night sky is, I've created the artwork for those places. So almost ironically, the more that I've helped to try to promote the night sky in places, the less I've actually been able to go out to these places. So being able to come here to Grand Canyon, spend 3 weeks to just be out, see the canyon at night, to make sketches and do those drawings while I'm actually here and watching as the lighting changes from afternoon to sunset to night. It's been rejuvenating for me, and it's allowed me to reconnect to what is it I'm actually doing and why, so that I can better promote this park to the visiting public.
So some feedback you've shared with me this week is some of the interactions you've had with kids who want to become maybe a budding scientist or astronomer. For any viewers that maybe have a kid in their life like that, what advice would you give for them to kind of follow those dreams or to get into astronomy?
So yesterday I went out and I spent 2 hours sitting on the north porch at El Tovar Hotel. And I spoke to a lot of little kids, some in third grade, some in ninth grade, who said they wanted to work for NASA someday. And that's wonderful, because I wanted to do something very similar when I was a kid. I wanted to be an astronaut. And so I wrote letters away to NASA asking, well, what do I have to do to be an astronaut? And so the number one thing they told me then is the number one thing I tell kids today: learn science, go to school, learn math, learn science. And if you find that you love those subjects, then you will love being a scientist. Math is the language of science. Science is the process of solving puzzles and learning about the natural world around you. And today, whether you're interested in geology, chemistry, astronomy, physics, all of scientific disciplines have in our understanding of the universe around us and of space. Biology, the field of exobiology, astrobiology, the possibility of life on other worlds. That is a new field that has only come around really in the last couple decades. So yeah, go to school.
So the way light pollution has affected and impacted the dark skies, how do you see future night skies being impacted? And how do you think we can help to create an environment to where we can try to reduce light pollution?
Great question. So there's a number of things to do. One is think about how much light do you actually need to, say, light up your house. There are people that move from the city out to the countryside and put up giant floodlights because they feel they want to be safe. And really, in a way, all they're doing is lighting up their house to announce to the world, hey, there's something here that I think is really valuable. And in fact, they may be the only source of light for 10 miles around. And yet those lights that they've put up are visible for miles and miles. A single campfire 10 miles away is as bright as the brightest star in the sky. Okay, so think about how much light do you really need to light up your house, your property, your town. Second thing, use as little light as you can get away with. Put shades on it so that light doesn't shine up in the air, but just down on the ground, because on the ground is where you want it to be able to see a sidewalk, see your door, for traffic to see you. Then the last part is the wavelength of that light. The last decade has seen a revolution in blue LED lights. These LED lights light up the night to look like daytime, which means they put out a lot of blue light, kind of like the blue light of the sky that we have during the day. These produce a lot of light for very little energy. And a lot of towns have said, well, hey, if we can get more light for less energy, that's great. Well, as a result, they're making light pollution even worse. So put in LED lights, but put in a warmer, sort of more yellowish glow of light, or an orangish glow, something that doesn't light up the night like daytime. The reason I say that is that blue light at night interferes with may have some negative health effects for us. So use a warmer, yellower, oranger light. It doesn't have to be blinding orange. Use the lowest light level you can get away with. You just want to be able to see things. You don't have to be able to read a newspaper in the middle of the street at midnight. And then maybe consider a timer so that if you don't need your porch light on at 3 in the morning, it goes off after you've gone to bed. That's my suggestion.
Let me see if we can just take our background off. Okay, we're going to take the background off so you can see both of us. I want to know about the young budding astronomer, Tyler Nordgren in school. What was your least favorite subject?
My least favorite subject was French. And I feel really bad saying that because I have since traveled a lot. In fact, one of the jobs that I now have is as a tour leader for people traveling to see solar eclipses or the Northern Lights. And there are places that we travel where I really wish I could speak another language. The last trip I went to was leading a group to Chile in 2019 to see a total solar eclipse. And we were welcomed into this small village up in the Andes. And I wished I could have been able to speak their language. Fortunately, I had an assistant who helped as a translator, but they were some of the warmest individuals, welcomed us to their town. We had a celebration together as the totality went overhead. But I really wish I could have been a better participant. So there is no useless knowledge.
So just for a fun piece of some pop culture, because this has been going on, are you familiar with Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic project? What are your thoughts on it?
I have to admit, I've mixed thoughts. In the early 2000s, and I drove with one of my students up to see the very first flight of Spaceship One when it won the Ansari X Prize, being the first commercial ship to travel twice into space. And it stirred the blood. It was exciting. I felt like that must have been what it was like to see Alan Shepard rocket into space and be the first American in space back in the 1960s. So I get that excitement. I wanted to be an astronaut as a kid. And as I got older and learned more and learned more science, astronaut turned into astronomer. And so I have to admit, today I'm kind of conflicted because NASA told me my best shot for going into space was to learn science. And so I became a scientist. If I knew then what I know now, honestly, probably the best shot I have to get into space is to become not a scientist, but a billionaire. And in a way, I'd feel bad if that's the lesson that today's children are. More. I don't know what folks might have missed, but in November of this year, I'm supposed to be leading a tour down to Antarctica to see a total solar eclipse from the ice flows off the coast of Antarctica. And that is something I am very excited to see. I have yet to travel to all 7 continents, and so that is one of my goals. And so to be able to get to Antarctica is a lifetime dream for me.
I'm very envious. That sounds absolutely incredible. Tyler, it's been such a pleasure. Anything else you want to share with us regarding your residency, things that you've learned?
Just tell you, whenever you get out in nature, go out, be out at night. Let your eyes adjust. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at your watch. Just spend 15 minutes looking at no source of light and then up at the sky, and you will see more than you'd ever thought possible before.
Great. So for those of you guys that joined us today, you can be and apply to be a Grand Canyon Astronomer resident, just like Dr. Nordgren, and applications are going to open up on July 30th of this month. And you can learn more at grandcanyon.org/astronomer. And this program is made possible because of support from Grand Canyon Conservancy, from our supporters and donors and grants. And we're so thankful and appreciative to everyone that continues to support us to make this program happen. And we're really excited to continue to share more from Tyler's experience here and what that next astronomer is going to bring. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to message us. Keep in touch with Tyler to see how the rest of his week pans out. And again, happy Tuesday.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.